Last month I decided that my game was full of design problems and other issues, so I'm starting again, and this time round I'm doing a proper pre-production phase. So what am I going to do differently this time? Well, let's identify 3 pillars of pre-production that was kind of missing beforehand. When you're making a game, it would be quite useful to find out exactly what that game is. I always knew that the game I was making was a tower defense game, but what I didn't spend time to figure out was how it matches the conventions that follow with that genre, and what my game is doing differently. In bigger teams and companies, this stage normally involves the writing of concept documents. But since I was just myself and didn't have anyone to hold me accountable except for myself, I skipped this and mostly just went into making the game straight away. That normally has worked out for me in the past, but that's mainly because my previous projects have been game jams, and so I'm not yet used to working on big projects. To change this, I planned out what I wanted and needed to do. It was at least a bit easier since I had an initial plan in place, and I can sort of pick and choose the elements I did like and go from there. So I boiled the game down to 2 core ideas. You place minions in rooms that will fight heroes that enter that room, and the heroes would move through the dungeons to get to the end boss. Previously, heroes would just swarm to the minions in a room whenever they enter, and this would end in both the heroes completely over-attacking a minion, and the minions in one room required to be completely obliterated in order for the heroes to then move on to the next one. What I've done this time round to try and fix that is having the heroes travel through the dungeon through paths. For the moment, this scene I'm using Sebastian Leig's Path Creator tool, and the heroes are moving along a Bezier spline. When the hero enters a room with a minion in, they would then move towards that closest minion. However, if the minion's attacking a maximum number of heroes, then any other heroes entering that room would have to move through to the next one. It may not completely solve one of the biggest design flaws of this game, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. Once you know your core concept for the game you're making, what would then be extremely useful to do is some target research. Take a look at games from similar genres or with similar themes or game mechanics. By studying them and finding out how they work, it will definitely help in either trying to recreate the magic from those games or try to redefine it. What normally happens here too is to discover what kind of audience you're making your game for, because once you've worked that out, you know how to appeal to that certain demographic. The thing is with tower defense games is that they're quite well known, but yet I can't really think of many popular tower defense games. The only ones I know properly are Bloons Tower Defense and Plants vs Zombies. So after some quick research, I found 2 other games that seem quite similar to what I'm wanting to do: Kingdom Rush and Dungeon Warfare 2. In Kingdom Rush, the enemies walk along a path to the end, as quite conventional with this type of genre, except the path is very wide. You have 4 base towers that you can upgrade, and one tower worth noting is the barracks. This tower places soldiers on the battlefield, and will engage in melee combat with the enemies. Each of our soldiers can attack only one enemy at a time, however you can have multiple soldiers fighting the same enemy. This is quite important to note, as I want to think more about how the melee combat can function in my game. Dungeon Warfare 2, on the other hand, is quite a different game. You don't get towers or soldiers, but you get traps instead. These traps all have different functions, and the enemies take many different paths to try to get to the end. The theme of this one seems to be very gory and fast paced, and it's not really that applicable to my game. But it's a fun one to research, and since I thought of implementing traps before, it might be of use later on down the line. Prototyping is kind of a given when it comes to starting a game, but it can be taken quite a few ways. Some people go the route of quickly churning out a variety of small playable games and use that to decide what idea to take further and expand on. A good example of this is Blackthorn Prod's video on making one small game a week, which he then took one of those ideas, and the result of that was Dashing Fire. This is, in my opinion, the better method, as you get to test a multitude of ideas and go with the one that is the most promising. If you have one idea which you are dead certain that you want to make into a game, then the second method is probably better for you. With the second method, you start with a single idea of a game you really want to make, and then you just start making it. This method is a lot less flexible and is a path most likely to end in failure in my eyes, as it often starts with an ambitious spur-of-the-moment development surge, before you're quite far into development and only then start to think of whether your game is fun or not, or what identity your game has. I often see this method taken on YouTube devlogs where people have a great idea for a game, have a lot of fun getting into development, but then either have to cancel their game because of things like scope creep, or have to put a lot of time and effort into fixing problems that just weren't thought of at the beginning. This is in short what I did with Cardallion, and it took me some time to finally face that problem that I've been intentionally ignoring for some time. Now I've changed my development process in light of this to test things every now and then. For example, with the navigation, I first tried using Unity's nav mesh system for the minions and heroes, but I was unhappy with how it was performing because it wasn't giving me that much freedom and control over how they acted, and the minions and the heroes often ended up pushing each other around, which just looked really janky. So then that led me on to using the Bezier paths. And then for a hero to move to a minion, I decided to write my own script, which is a simple move towards that will get one of the minion's attack points around them and have the hero move to there before starting to attack. All this came about through prototyping ideas and methods and knowing where I failed before, as I wouldn't have been able to work out something like this if I didn't test the methods out. Mark Brown has a great video on how you shouldn't get too attached to your original idea and let the game grow and adapt into something completely different if that's what it needs to be. So where is the game at after 1 month? Well, at the moment, the heroes move from the start to the end, and then if they get close enough to a minion, they'll start attacking that minion, and then the minion will start attacking back the hero until either one is defeated. It isn't a lot in the grand scheme of things, but in this month I have solved quite a few issues. The previous version had no limit on the combat. The navigation agents pushing each other around a lot not only looked really messy, but also kind of performed messy too. The new version limits and controls the combat more tightly with the navigation agents stripped out, and it feels a lot more concise, and I am a lot happy with how this is looking now. At the moment it's more of a simulation than a game because the player cannot interact with it at all. So in the next month my goal will be working on the minion placement so the player can actually play the game. I also plan on working out the dungeon traversal with possible branching paths, and hopefully get time to also make an end boss to have a win-fail state. Once I have all that down, the prototype should be fully playable, and I can consider getting some people to play it and see what they come back with. But that's it for now. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you know when the next devlog is, and I'll see you all next month.